Well, for our podcast this week, we stream these things as well. We have a video version; they get uploaded to our VMware Tanzu page. We're gonna try some. We're gonna push the limits of the audio only format, Ben, and that is we're gonna have you share your screen as we talk about the most exciting conference of the year, the SpringOne conference, which is December 6th to 8th. Now, we're gonna kind of move up the expertise level of podcasting, where even though we'll have a visual, we're going to not rely on it to communicate the vital information that the listeners need. But it's sort of like it's sort of like an extra pizza topping that you can add on optionally if that doesn't work. I'm going to abandon that metaphor and just move on. But it is an enhancement that we can have.
So for those who don't know, this is on YouTube. So you'll find us on the VMware Tanzu YouTube channel. That's where it normally gets posted to, right, Kote?
Exactly. If you just go to tanzutalk.com and you'll find a link to the video. And then after we go over a little bit of what's going on at SpringOne, we'll, as we often do, hopefully every time, we'll go over some interesting news items and a little bit of stuff, the fun news and trend stuff that's happening out there. But before that, so we do have coming up this December in San Francisco. I don't know how many years we've been doing the SpringOne conference, but many. As I like to say, it's got your developer stuff, your operations things, and then also your managerial enterprise architect executive stuff, like tales of people reprogramming their business and how they're doing that sort of work. And this year, I think things have been going pretty well as far as the planning. Just to get it out of the way, I have a talk on a new topic that I've been we finally published this. I should put a link to it because I think there's a way at the moment where you can download this PDF called The Legacy Trap that my co-author Mark Zartner and I worked on. And I don't think you even have to give us your email address. It's ungated, as people say. I think maybe there is a support ticket somewhere to put a gate up, but until that ticket is in effect, you can get it for free, which, it is nice, but it's also cool to get like credit for lead genning and things like that. But whatever, we have a talk that basically is just our overview of the legacy trap thing, and the premise of that talk is basically like, here's the methodology that people in Tanzu Labs and other people have come up with. I don't know, maybe over the past at least 5 years to kind of sort out like what you should modernize, how to pick things out to modernize. And then even if you're going into re-architecting and rewriting, some kind of like day or so long processes to go through to kind of get a handle on how would we break up this application and kind of start to actually modernize it, right? As opposed to like, I think maybe the classic method of modernization, which is like, hey, developers, you should go move this to a new platform. And, not really having a lot of strategic input into it. So that will be fun to give with Mark. And, I also don't know if I've ever seen Mark in person, which would be delightful to see. However, that is just one talk out of many, many talks that we have. How to escape the legacy track, a proven strategy for application modernization. I'll let the listeners who aren't watching the stream play a little game. Leave us a comment and tell us where you think the colon is in that sentence. And that'll be a good grammar check. But what's the structure of the conference that we have here, right, Ben? I gave an idea of kind of like three broad topics, but how are we corralling all these talks into kind of like tracks and things like that? What are the themes?
Well, I think if you're going to talk about the structure, it's important to talk about the structure of the whole thing. So the very first thing that happens, day zero, if you like, is the kind of workshop day. So there's a lot of workshops on that day. We'll come back to that in a second. And then on the actual schedule itself, if you have a look at the breakout session, so you click on schedule up at the top here, and then you click on breakout sessions for Wednesday, December the 7th, then you can see all the breakouts. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 tracks, 7 tracks. Biggest deal, I think, is the fact that the beginner-friendly Spring track has returned, and will I think it's really popular, and I love it because it's the place that I go to first to find out about how to get started with all the new stuff that they're adding into Spring. So, if they add a new thing around, I don't know, observability or metrics or whatever, there's usually some sort of talk there that you'll find in a beginner friendly track that will give you all the sort of tips that you need to just get up and running and get started. So that's my favorite track by far. And this year, I know it's bigger than ever. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in that particular track.
And I guess it's worth, for whatever reason, I guess I'm always trying to generalize and widen the SpringOne conference, but like, as is in the name right there, there's a whole lot about the Spring framework, right? So like, I think, if you're doing like Java development, and I think especially like, I was talking with someone yesterday about this. I don't know what people call enterprise Java development anymore, but Java development for business things. I don't know. Like it seems like a huge amount of what goes on at SpringOne is catered for those types of developers who just want to, not just, but want to keep up with what's going on in Spring and the Java world and practices. It's a really good developer conference in that aspect.
Yes, I would say it's not tilted towards someone who wants to write Minecraft in Java. It's more tilted towards someone who wants to, probably works for a business of some kind, wants to solve business problems, or has a particular innovation or itch that they want to scratch, and they want a framework that's going to help them do that with the least toil possible, and yet be able to address the sort of broadest range possible. So that's where Spring's really in its sweet spot.
And then, there's also like with the history of the conference, there's plenty of things about like, as you can see in the topics, there'll be some talks about Cloud Foundry, plenty of talks about like operations things, like working, doing, kind of platforms to have to vagueize and generalize the term for it, right? Whatever that stack of software you're building up, whether it's on top of a Cloud Foundry or a Kubernetes or whatever, that your developers then use to deploy and run their applications.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff in here. I mean, you just click on any one of these and already I'm getting excited. So for example, there's a talk in the platform and stacks track from Netflix about how Netflix really uses Java today. Now, Netflix has always been the poster child of things like Spring Cloud, for example. So to hear the very latest about how they're still utilizing Spring and how they're using it today and how their use of it has changed, that's really exciting. That would definitely be one that I would probably put on my bucket list for SpringOne. But then it's not all sort of like beginners and big tech companies either. There's also this intermediate and advanced Spring track. So if you really already deep in the weeds on something, there's probably a talk in here that you'll find really interesting that'll help you get even deeper and be able to converse with the experts who write this stuff. I mean, let's not forget, the folks who are speaking are usually also the ones who are behind the scenes doing an awful lot of the code that gets contributed to the open source Spring framework. So there's loads of opportunities to meet folks that you'll recognize from past advances in Spring, folks like Sam Brannan there, Matt Rabel, and Josh Long and others. They're all going to have talks at SpringOne. So I think there's a lot to commend about this. There's tons to get excited about.
So I over the years, I've done a lot more work than I did this year, kind of helping out with the, I don't know, like the agile leadership kind of case studies track. And I've done a little bit of work now, an embarrassingly small amount for supposed to have been involved more, I guess. However, like I think, in looking at in that track, kind of people telling the stories of what they've been doing. I think, what we try to curate in that kind of track are, again, in kind of like a more, not Although the story of how someone modernized like the Minecraft monolith would probably be pretty interesting. If you there's a lot of like, you've got a extremely mature code base that has a huge user base, like revenue they need to worry about, and changing things, changing the engines while the plane is flying. There probably are a lot of opinions they have to sort through, conflicting technology uses based on who they're owned by and what they might want to use. Like, you've probably got everything. And then you've got customer data and things to worry about, not to mention like a bunch of kids doing stuff, so you've got to protect them. So that probably would be a fascinating enterprise use case that would bring in all the things that like a bank, insurance company, or military would care about. Maybe we'll try to recruit them for next year. However, when it comes to those things that they are like in the more the business world, like historically, we've had stories. There's over the years we've had all sorts of stories from like insurance companies, militaries, banks, manufacturers. Like, I'm thinking, I was rewatching some from the Mercedes people from a couple of years ago about how they had, people didn't use the term platform engineering back then. Instead, we would say platform as a product or just platform. But it goes over at Mercedes, like how they came across the need to have a platform, kind of identifying why they needed to build a platform to support, at the time, the Mercedes Me application, the little app that, I don't know, is your car's app? There must be a name for that kind of app. All cars have apps now. But how they needed that, and kind of like the lessons learned and how they were supporting developers. This is all on top of, at the time, Pivotal Cloud Foundry, now Tanzu Application Service. But there are several talks like that where, there's the structure that I like in these stories is basically like our organization, I'll just say business, needed to do something. And the stack that we had and the way that we use that stack wasn't up for it. So we had to put a new stack in place and a new way of doing software in place. And it'd be great if I had examples prepared of the talks that we have this year for that. But there are several in there that I'm looking forward to having read over them.
I think it's brilliant. I'm flicking around, as people can see if they're following us on YouTube, and just having a look at a few talks. But some of these titles are really good. Who should use Kubernetes?
Yes,
what a great talk title, right?
Yes, from Whitney on my team. Hopefully, she'll bring her giant light board and go over lightboarding stuff.
So there's tons of stuff here. But also part of the schedule, like I said, is the workshops. The workshops, if you can get signed up for the workshops, which do have a limited number of places, but if you can get signed up for them, you are going to have a really good time. For example, Better Path to Production with Spring Boot. Instructors, Josh Long and Tiffany Jernigan. I mean, you can't get better instructions on that from better people than those two on how to get to production with Spring Boot. So there's tons of stuff here. I know as well. My friend Adib has also got a session. Here we go. Increased developer productivity with Spring and VMware Tanzu application platform. There's tons of really good workshops. So if you like, to actually learn something while you're at a conference, deep dive, spend a few hours on something, get yourself signed up for a workshop. They're on the day zero of the conference, and you'll really enjoy those, I think.
So
question for you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Question, because I haven't looked too much at SpringOne, despite the fact I'm sure I should have. Is that all in person and virtual? I'm assuming everything is hybrid now, but I know in some conferences things like workshops are in person only, that kind of thing. Is this all virtual? Can anyone do it?
To the best of my knowledge, it's all in person.
Okay, interesting.
So that's pretty good, because the hybrid thing, in some scenarios, like a learning scenario, it's been a bit hit and miss for the folks in the room, right? So you committed, you got to go. You got to go.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'd love to go back to in person. Like you said, that ability to focus for your week, your 4 days, 5 days, however long it is. And especially for things like workshops, which is, I think, why it flagged in my head of actually you're in a room, nothing else to worry about. Nobody's saying, hang on, do this, that, the other while you're at work still. That'd be priceless.
Yeah. That, I was thinking about that. I mean, to preview a little ahead, maybe, like there was this platform engineering conference called PlatformCon, and I think it was all online. And so I went to their videos and I was like, I should just sit down and watch most of those videos. And then I thought, like, man, that's going to be so hard to like force myself to like be in a conference mindset to not do other work because I'm at work instead of at a conference. But I don't know. Maybe I can make it happen. We'll find out. And yeah, I mean, back to SpringOne. I mean, like you're saying, there's all sorts of great speakers, people that we have. It'll be good. I think as I get more of a view into like what we're doing on the main stage and things like that, it'll be fun to talk about and preview that as we go towards that. I don't know. Sometimes people like to be all secretive about what's on the main stage, like for whatever reason. But we'll see what's possible. So, if you're interested in that, it's really, I think we have most of the sessions posted, but not all of them, if I remember. And so if you go to springone.io and you click on schedule and then you click on breakout sessions, you can start looking through what those sessions are and those tracks and organized. And like Ben was saying, there's workshops to go through, and in addition to the types of sessions we were talking about, a pretty good educational event, and also just kind of finding out what's going in the industry and the chance to talk with people and hang out and get all that. What's the word? Serendipitous? Is that right? The unplanned for good things that happen. I think that's otherwise it would be called, what would be the opposite of serendipitous? Accidents. I think accidents are rarely serendipitous. I'll have to go look this up in my, as my dad would say, Funkin' Wagnall, and see what it says. What was, when y'all were in your teens over there in the United Kingdom, England, Britain? I don't want to make that mistake of mixing them all up, but over there in the islands, what was the? Did you have like the Rogers and the Funkin' Wagnall? What was like the jokey dictionary that everyone used and referred to?
Oh, that's a good question. Doofer's the only thing I remember. Doofer was like anything you wanted it to be.
Okay, that's good.
And it tended to be a TV remote, but it ended up being generic.
Because by design, American dictionaries are very anti-UK. Right? Like I think because isn't Webster, Webster and Franklin, their original thing was we need to have American English, and so that's how they came up with all these American Americanized versions of English and things like that. So it would make me assume that there must be England English dictionaries that are still patriotic to the original language versus us crazy Americans who don't know how to spell things that have we just why don't we just use a Z? Let's get some use out of that character.
I'm sure there is. It's the Oxford Dictionary. You would think that would still be the epitome of the British one, but I've no idea if it is or not. I mean, none of us actually use the dictionary anymore, right? Now it's whatever's built into Word, which is produced by an American company. So mine seems to default to US. However many times I set it back to UK, somewhere I've not configured it, and it's still US.
Finally, Franklin and Webster, victorious by accident.
Yeah.
However, you can also just do the language, the variant settings. So maybe not. Maybe who knows? Well, maybe a listener knows, and they can write in and tell us, or dissuade me of my cockamamie retconning of dictionary history. Which sounds thrilling. Anyhow, but if you want to look into those sessions, you can go to springone.io. And I think, as we were going over, there's a lot in there, especially if you're a Java developer, but also if you're just in an organization looking to figure out how to get better at software, interested in all the container stuff out there, the cloud stuff. And, as you may know, when you register at springone.io, you can use the code COTE200 to get $200 off registration, which you can then use to buy some burritos or whatever you like. If you're in San Francisco and you don't live there normally, especially if you're from out of the country, when you go to San Francisco, you want to get what they call a mission burrito, which basically people would call a burrito nowadays. It's just one of those gigantic, if you were to make a fist out of both hands and stack them on top of each other, it's a little bit bigger than that. And it's a gigantic, tasty burrito, depending on what you like to eat. But you could take that $200 and boy, you could get a super fancy burrito for $200, depending on what the exchange rate is at the time. But if you go to springone.io, you can register and use the code COTE200 to get $200 off. Now, there were many other conferences since last time we talked. I think it looks like HashiConf had a conference. The eBPF summit sessions were online. There's the Kong summit. Like, let's just pick. What are your highlights from these conferences, Ed? What
So
were they fun?
Good question, I guess. So the HashiCorp one, I thought was probably the sort of the most high-profile one of those. A bunch of product announcements, as you would expect, to kind of Vault and Boundary and Console, their various service mesh, and I mean, everyone knows Terraform, right? The one thing I always think with HashiCorp is they do a very good job of both engaging community, iterating all these products, and they are all kind of easy to get started with. It's something they seem to have focused on. Red Monk put out a blog about the conference, and that was one of their takeaways, was that simplicity and ease of use has always been sort of a key feature for them, and particularly with things like their Service Mesh product. Service Mesh has a history of being, or a reputation, should I say, for being complex. And HashiCorp have definitely aimed at their sort of differentiation being simple to use. And obviously they've now got HashiCorp's cloud platform, and a load of the new features were around use of that. So again, more SaaS-based, again, making things quicker and easier to use. I can't say any one of the sort of the product announcements really made me go, wow, that looks astounding, which is not, not a do on them at all. It's just, there was no thunder and lightning moments in any way. But little by little, they're putting together a nice cohesive set of products that all kind of work together. So just have a look at the site. They've got a whole bunch of blog posts about all the various feature announcements and all the different products. I'd have a review of those myself. The eBPF one, my only thing that struck me with that is I wanted to go and watch a load of it. And the sessions are up and online, and maybe it's just a time thing. They are literally day one, here's a 5-hour recording. Day two, here's a 5-hour recording. And it's like you said.
Oh, it wasn't spliced up? Yeah.
And set aside 2 days, but I can't. So I kind of want that. Here's the keynote. Here's this session. Here's that one. Oh, I can squeeze 40 minutes in, especially at 1.5 times speed. 5 hours was a no. But I said that may be a expedite things, stick it up day one, and then carve it up into sessions later on.
I take it there's no chapter titles then, because that's so easy to do with YouTube when you post a video, like sticking your chapter titles on there. They could have done that at least, surely. They
might have, right? I went on and it said, here are the sessions, and they sort of badged up as day one, day two, and I went to day one and I saw the slider and it was 5 hours, and I was like, no. And that was maybe there were breakouts to it and easier ways to index it or something. But I'd looked and I just thought, right, I think it was Liz Rice doing the keynote, and I thought, well, she's always good to listen to. I'll go and listen to a keynote, and then saw that and thought, maybe later. Just because it didn't feel like a bite-sized chunk that I could. Probably it's just literally thinking day one was 5 hours, not, I can make 20 minutes to listen to that. Yes, I'll do it. It's probably more of a reflection on me than them, but there we go.
Yeah, the various DevOps days, whatever, they used to do it a lot more, but every now and then there's still some that will do that, because what they do is not obviously, they stream the events, right? And then so those videos are actually like the saved streams that they have. And then some weeks later, after the conference organizers have had a good nap, I think they do come back and slice them up. But yeah, it is kind of funny when, that's always a good situation where there's like a 5-hour block. And then as a speaker, I'm often like, of course, I want to show off some work that I did. And, I know how to make a bookmark that starts you at 2 hours and 42 minutes. But still, it's kind of like weird to be like, check out this talk in this 5-hour block of stuff. But that reminds me, Ben, since maybe for people who watch this care, since you're such a big star on YouTube, did you see that they have a new thing called a handle, and everyone's going to be able to get a handle, right? But not everyone at once. Somehow they're going to notify you when you can register for your handle. So potentially, I'll probably never be able to get this, but I could get at Cote, as I have in most other services, and you can just say at, and then you can refer to people instead of using the channel ID that I have is from my original podcast, Drunken Retired, which is probably not great, as James Governor told me when he hired me at Red Monk, to use in a professional capacity, despite the greatness of the content.
Mostly because you're neither.
Yeah, well, that's true. When I made up that domain name in college, the person I was talking with, like our joke was like, those are two things to aspire to, and you can always have one of them. And so like it's half possible dreams if you're looking to
different
achieve your
times.
dreams.
Different
Yes,
times.
Yes.
indeed.
So these handles are going to be like the blue tick marks on Twitter, are they? Where you've got to have 50,000 followers minimum to actually be a public person and qualify or something.
Well, anyone can get a handle once they tell you can get it, and I think it's over the next 2 weeks they're rolling it out. It's not a verified thing, but it's just so that I mean, it's a little odd because they already have channel names you can set up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a new thing.
How many handles per channel then, or do you not get handles per channel? Do you get one handle? How does it work?
I think it's one handle per channel. That's the distinction. Is this refers to your channel, not you? I think.
Well,
Whatever. That was our YouTube star corner for this episode.
YouTube tip of the day.
hey, but while we're talking about it, Kota, I do have a new video on YouTube right now.
Oh, yes.
Entitled "Deploy Your Python Apps to Safely to Production." So go check it out.
Oh
Put it in
yeah.
the show notes.
that would be nice. I'll have to look that up. Do you think it's worth my time one day in the future, like learning Python, Ben? Is that something I should do?
I think you should learn the language that you find the most interesting, because it's like anything in life. If you have an interest in something, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like a pleasure, right? So
Yeah. I guess I asked that inaccurately. I think the only reason nowadays I would invest time in learning a language is if it was if I could use it often just for quick utilitarian functions that I needed, right? And I feel like a lot of what I would be doing is manipulating and doing text stuff and merging things around and I guess I could go relearn Perl, but that doesn't seem like a thing one would do. It seems like if you're doing numbers and characters and simple stuff like that Python is what you would learn. Plus it's ubiquitous and everywhere.
Yeah, you're dead right. Python's got a huge reputation as being a very sort of pliable language. You can wire together all sorts of things, from video to artificial intelligence to machine learning to just doing a spreadsheet. Whatever it is that you want to do, it's one of those languages where you can probably do it, and it probably won't kill you to do it either, which is also nice.
And then of course you can deploy it securely and safely.
Absolutely, to production.
Yes.
which is the content of my latest video. Yeah, so go check it out. We'll put it in the show notes.
Well, I think there's two more things I wanted to go over before we wrap up. One is that the everyone's favorite, the State of DevOps report, the Google State of DevOps report, or Accelerate, is out recently. And I talked about this on we talked about it a little bit on my other podcast, Software Defined Talk, last week, where I fully admitted I haven't read it yet, but let's talk about it, which is sort of and now I think I've read some of it. I've skimmed through it, and I didn't realize it was 77 pages. And as someone who writes 70 to 80 page things, I'm not making fun of it. I just need to invest some time in skimming through it. But it looks like there's a pretty deep focus on security in there, and I think also, what's interesting. What's one of the key things that's interesting about the DevOps report is trying to draw some sort of I'm no statistician, or however you say that, but trying to draw some sort of causation correlation between behaviors and the performance and success of the organizations who do them. And I think there's some interesting new ways of looking at that as far as things people are doing. But have either of y'all had a chance to skim through it and draw anything interesting from it?
I'm sorry, I've not. No, I tell you what I did do though, which relates to the last conversation. Ed talking about eBPF so much did make me go and do a little bit of research on what that's all about, and that did blow my mind. But no, I've not seen the DevOps one yet. I need to go and have a look at it. I'm sorry, I've not done my homework. I need to go look at that one.
I feel much the same way. There was a lot out sort of in the last couple of weeks to try and absorb, and that just becomes another one, and especially because there was a SysTig one on security. and this sort of security focused one from Google, which is a bit more, as you say, that's a bit more process, a bit more high level maybe than the SysTig one. But there's so much to sort of consume. And actually, for me, it's when I read through them, is it all still mixes into platform engineering, all this, trying to find what is actually new. Because I can look at the SysTig one, and my takeaway after skimming it for 5 minutes was, security firm finds that there are vulnerabilities in containers and everywhere. Well, I knew that before I even looked at the report, So there wasn't anything massively new in any of them. The Google one, again, if I read it and thought about it for a while, I would probably end up with a bit of a takeaway of, things have moved on a bit from where I thought they would be, right? Platform engineering is one of those things that has been around a bit amorphous for a while. In my head, at least, it's firming up a bit what it is. I suspect if I read the Google report, it would firm up in my head a few more concepts that I sort of understand, but don't necessarily refer to with the right terminology or something.
Indeed, and then that's a great segue, because that's the other thing. I was, obviously over the past year, there's been a lot of like platform engineering talk, and on Sunday morning this past weekend, to give you an example of how thrilling my personal time is spent, I was just looking through things. And I was realizing, I realized that, I kind of rethought about the fact that there was a platform con out there, and there's all this platform engineering talk. And, over the past year or so, I think that has really cemented itself as the new phrase for what we used to call whatever, right? Like, there's a continuing evolution of how do you do operations for the stack of stuff that you run your custom software on? And, we evolve that phrase every now and then. Like, I think the team topologies people use the phrase platform as a product. And several years ago, we would use that phrase to describe kind of like, when you get a platform as a service, a cloud foundry thing in place, how do you operate that and make it better for developers? But I feel like we're pretty close to essentially saying like, nope, the phrase you use now is platform engineering. I think that's what it is. And a lot of, I'm not quite done. I tried to make a video summarizing it in 60 seconds, and then I watched it and I'm like, no, that's no good. So I still need to do like some learning how to like be concise about it, as I'm proving right now. But I think it's a good sort of, it's good to have everyone's attention on how do we treat customers or developers as customers, and go beyond just like providing tools for them, and think about how we incorporate that into the platform, which I think is like, maybe my theory is that there's renewed interest in this now because, I'm doing air quotes here, quote unquote, everyone wants to have their platform on Kubernetes now, which sort of opens up again the problem of like, but you're going to need to add a lot to that to make it usable for developers. And that's what your platform engineering team does. So it's kind of, brought this vacuum in there. And Charity Majors has a lengthy piece that actually has a table going over like different activities and things that's fun to look at. That's a good summary of it. And there's also our old friend Paula has a talk out. She's one of the people that I first started learning about this stuff in 2017 or 2018. So she has an updated talk kind of going over the idea of platform engineering and platform as a product, which is great. So there's been a lot of good thought leadership and defining there that I think will be interesting to look at. Maybe in future episodes, I'll have a more concise way of looking at it. Plus, all of this talk about pre-recorded conferences is making me think, just as a new policy, maybe we can work this into the Accelerate State of DevOps Report 2023, that what executives should focus on is setting aside a day or two called conference day, where like you give people the freedom to actually sit down and watch a bunch of YouTube videos for a conference. And the reasoning would be like, you need to have continuing education and training. And normally you would send people to conferences, but this is very expensive. Whereas if you could just give them 2 days to just watch a bunch of conference stuff online, maybe they won't get the full benefit, but they'll actually do it, as we have demonstrated many times. You're just like, I don't know, I don't have time for that, I got other stuff to do. But you could have the bosses actually force doing it, and they could check in. You could have like a break, kind of like the conference thing will have like a 30-minute break, and maybe you have a 30-minute thing, and the boss will like come online and be like, hey, look, I'm watching conference stuff too, eating crappy snacks that we sent to people, like the little granola bars and things like that, just like a real conference. Not at SpringOne, though, which is going to have great snacks, not just granola bars and things like that, I hope. But I don't know. Do y'all have anything else you want to empty from the out basket before we wrap up here?
Well, you mentioned Kubernetes there just a moment ago, and I do remember one short report that came across my desk this week, which was from WAN Clouds. They'd done a survey of the cost associated with cloud, and there were some very interesting findings in there. For example, that yes, a lot of people want to move to Kubernetes, but some of them find that can get quite expensive for unexpected reasons, not because Kubernetes is expensive. It's not, it's free as in free beer or whatever, but actually running it and then the proliferation of it that can sometimes happen if you're sort of slightly out of control with how your developers get clusters, for example, or if you don't have a good handle on all the observability and metrics needed to run that, as well as being able to translate what you see into how much it will cost to run it in the cloud, then some folks are getting burned apparently, and that was a really interesting report. And it's sort of, last week we had Nick on, didn't we, talking about Tanzu application service, and that's one of the alternative ideas is, well, maybe I don't need Kubernetes, maybe it's not right for me, maybe this SpringOne talk we were talking about earlier might have some insights there about when to use Kubernetes and when not to use it. But also at the same time, there was a ton of good stuff in there about, do you actually know what your costs are right now for running anything in the cloud in any way, whether it's Kubernetes or not? Do you actually know what it costs? Can you predict how much it's going to cost? And do you have a good handle on that? Because in all likelihood, with the kind of economic outlook at the moment, budgets are going to be a bit squeezed. So maybe it's a good time to figure out if you have a handle on that or not.
Yeah. You want to remove costs as something that's going to be annoying for you. not making it totally free. That would be cool too. But just in the sense of like, all of a sudden we've discovered this thing that we didn't know about that's now preventing us from going forward. Boy, that was really vaguely put. But like, I think because like in the I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, in kind of like one of the first waves of anti-public cloud FUD, it was just like costs, right? Like, having to pay for something. But I think everyone understands nowadays that like public cloud or any cloud isn't free. and then what becomes important is like, so now that we've accepted that, like, how do you make sure you're not wasting money, right? Like there's no need to like burn money to be awesome. You can control it and understand it and get a hold of things, which I think is, I don't know, isn't always a focus early on in new technologies emerging. It's only when they get mainstream use that it's something wise to pay attention to.
Yeah, and when you're a customer of 3 clouds, plus you've still got your data center, it's kind of like, okay, this is kind of getting a bit difficult to track. Like, I've got these credit card bills coming in, but do I know what they're exactly for? Have I got a load of stuff I'm not using? So if you don't have a handle on it, it can really bite you, I think.
That's right. Well, hopefully you, the dear listeners, have gotten a handle on a little bit of the things going on in the old cloud native, whatever we call this world nowadays. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, we'll have links to things we talked about. Probably not links to things we didn't talk about. We'll see. But if you go to tanzutalk.com, you can find the show notes for this episode and find those links. Look at those surveys and other stuff like that. And also, of course, just as a reminder, we have SpringOne coming up December 6th and 8th. I think if you've listened this far, you have an idea of what's going on there. But you should sign up for it. Look at the sessions, check it out. And I'll just put the code you can use to get $200 off in the show notes if you really need it. Why go over it again? That's not a good practice for advertising anything, right? To repeat yourself. They say just say it once, if I remember. So with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.